The afternoon was disrupted not by a siren, but by the slow, low hiss of heat over water, as if the river itself was gasping for breath. Officer Tim Rackley walked the line where brown water met pale sand, his boots leaving prints that would vanish by night. The city behind him was quiet, subdued by the heat. Traffic lights blinked lazily at sparse cars and the river moved steadily, flashes of light reflecting off its surface. Tim enjoyed this duty, especially when it felt like this: heavy heat, little wind, no blaring radios. He could simply observe, wave to joggers, and pretend the river moved for him. He hadn't slept well, the apartment too hot. At 2 a.m., he stood in front of the open fridge, contemplating his badge in the dim light. The job was best when it surprised him in small ways, not with big surprises like guns raised too fast or mothers clutching his sleeve by a hospital bed. Today was slow, too slow for big surprises. He leaned out to see how the current chewed at the bank. Across the river, a man fished from a rusted lawn chair, raising 2 fingers in greeting. Tim nodded back and continued walking. Tim stepped around a drifted log, noting the debris it carried, a child's sneaker with sand collected in one heart-shaped decoration. He wondered where its pair had gone. A few strides later, his boots scuffed something with a different sound, not wood or rock, but a heavy, stubborn clank muffled by sand. He stopped and looked down. The mound could have been anything, but its deep, rotten orange-brown color wasn't sand. He crouched, digging with his fingers, uncovering a curve, a flat plane, a seam. Rust flaked into his nails as he uncovered a heavy, squared edge, a door with a dial worn smooth by years in water. It was a safe, half buried like it had decided to sleep. But before we start, smash the like button and make sure to subscribe if you haven't, and hit that notification bell so that you won't miss any new stories. Tim looked around to see if anyone else was nearby. He could hear his academy instructor's voice in his head. Secure. Call it in. Assess threat. Consider evidence. Don't stick your hand where it shouldn't go. He stood, backed up, and keyed his mic. 312 to dispatch. Go ahead, 312. I've got an object on the east bank. Looks like a safe, partially buried. Requesting backup and evidence unit. We're about 100 yards south of Pier 5. Mark it at the old pump station. Copy that, 312. Backup en route, evidence notified. You want me to ping Sarge? Affirmative. Tim waited for his heart to settle as he looked at the safe again. There was a reason people locked things up, a reason they didn't want them found. He thought of the way the dial felt under his fingers, reminiscent of his grandfather's desk and the letters tied with twine that promised secrets not yet to be revealed. Within 5 minutes, Sergeant Alvarez arrived with 2 officers. She walked unaffected by the heat. What do we have? She asked. Tim pointed. Haven't seen one of those in a while. Me either, Sarge, he replied. They set things in motion, cordoning the path with tape, waving off passers-by. Alvarez called in the commander for a specialist. The evidence tech, a young officer with a camera, took distance shots before moving in for close-ups of the pitted dial and the faint maker's plate. Dearden and Sons, the tech indicated to Tim, suggesting it was an old safe, possibly from the early 80s or 70s. It wasn't a common big-box store item. The river continued its flow as the fisherman lit a cigarette, observing the scene. Alvarez, who was in charge, received a dispatch query about freezing the riverbank but decided to limit the area to Pier 5, avoiding unnecessary disruption. Tim felt a thrill in the moment, realizing how his observations could command attention. Despite being an average student in high school, he enjoyed the satisfaction of uncovering something significant. A plain white van arrived, and a tall, lean man named Mr. Locke emerged, his presence commanding respect. Alvarez introduced him, and Mr. Locke acknowledged the situation, ready to tackle the stubborn safe. Mr. Locke, with his tools, began examining the safe, treating it like an old friend. He unpacked his equipment, including a stethoscope, and prepared to work. The atmosphere tensed as he started, his focus evident. Tim stood by, aware of the gravity of the moment. Time seemed to stretch as Mr. Locke expertly manipulated the safe's dial, demonstrating patience akin to a sacred ritual. Alvarez maintained vigilance, and the fisherman discreetly left, sensing an impending change. The evidence tech captured the scene, his camera acting instinctively. Tim inquired about Mr. Locke's day, to which he replied that locks were more straightforward than people, as they revealed what they contained without coaxing. Mr. Locke continued his meticulous work, and eventually a soft click resonated. It was a sound that could have come from the safe or Tim's own anticipation. Mr. Locke's hands paused, and he breathed deeply while Tim realized he hadn't been breathing. Using a hooked tool, Mr. Locke attempted to open the safe. He draped a canvas blanket over it, creating a discreet working space. He instructed everyone to remain quiet, allowing him to concentrate. Under the blanket, Mr. Locke performed precise maneuvers, and soon a third authoritative click was heard. He set the blanket aside and with effort opened the safe door. A musty smell emerged, reminiscent of old paper and rust but not decay, much to Tim's relief. The door opened further, revealing darkness inside. Mr. Locke used his light to explore the contents cautiously, like someone entering an unfamiliar room at night. Despite his earlier caution, Tim gasped involuntarily, joined by Mr. Locke's own quiet exclamation. The safe was full, but not with cash or neatly arranged weapons. Tim and his colleagues Alvarez and Mr. Locke discovered a safe filled with papers and gold bars. The papers were covered in thick dust, indicating they had been undisturbed for a long time. Among the papers, Tim noticed stamps and typed words, some of which were faded but still legible. The words "Top Secret" stood out, sending a chill through him. The papers contained project names and information about covert operations, some dating back to when Tim was a child. The gold bars were bright and heavy, adding to the gravity of the discovery. Mr. Locke's reaction to the papers was one of shock, his face going pale as he examined them. He instructed Tim and Alvarez not to speak of the find. Alvarez maintained a level voice, but her body language betrayed her unease. Mr. Locke showed them a page with faded stamps and names, some familiar and others unknown. The papers detailed secret projects and shipments, hinting at a hidden history. Tim realized the significance and potential danger of their discovery. Alvarez acknowledged they were out of their depth and suggested handling the gold by the book, documenting everything with photographs and witnesses. She emphasized the importance of not disclosing the papers to anyone. Mr. Locke agreed, and they began to organize their findings. Alvarez contacted their captain, requesting someone with clearance to handle the situation discreetly. She stressed the need for secrecy, particularly regarding the papers. A black SUV arrived, carrying a woman with a file and a man in a bad tie. The woman introduced herself to Alvarez and took charge of the papers, agreeing to sign for them. Tim felt uneasy as the man inspected the safe, resisting the urge to shut it. The papers were packed into cases, signatures exchanged, and Alvarez kept a copy of the documentation with practiced professionalism. The woman acknowledged Tim by name and confirmed he had not read the papers, only seen the stamp. She thanked him for his service and made it clear the matter no longer belonged to him. The gold was logged into evidence while the papers disappeared into the SUV, driven away without hesitation. By sunset, the scene was gone and the riverbank looked untouched. Mr. Locke packed his tools while Tim scrubbed his hands without success. Alvarez advised him to go home and act as though nothing had happened. Before leaving, Tim approached Mr. Locke, who quietly remarked that the river kept its secrets. He warned Tim the experience would stay with him. Tim drove home watching unfamiliar cars in his mirror and listening to the distant sound of the river. That night he slept badly. The next day the station buzzed with news of the gold discovery. Officers congratulated Tim and joked about medals and free drinks. Alvarez silenced anyone who became too curious. A reporter approached Tim during lunch, but he redirected him to the department spokesperson. Mr. Locke disappeared for 2 days. When Tim finally found him at a breakfast counter eating oatmeal, the locksmith admitted someone had entered his shop and moved things around without stealing anything. The message had been simple. They could reach him whenever they wanted. Tim mentioned the suspicious cars he had noticed, and Mr. Locke advised him to stay steady, avoid heroics, and never get careless. Stories like this, he said, never truly ended. Soon after, Tim received a formal letter praising his integrity and discretion. He pinned it to his refrigerator, though it did little to improve his sleep. The woman from the SUV called once more, assuring him the documents were secure and reminding him never to discuss the matter. When Tim asked where the gold had come from, she answered only that some questions carried consequences. Life returned to routine. Tim continued patrol through the city's changing moods, helping strangers, calming arguments, and answering endless calls. Yet he often returned to the river, replaying the moment the safe had opened and revealed gold and sealed documents. He imagined men lowering the safe into the water years earlier, but he knew it was not his job to uncover the reason. He met Mr. Locke again by the river, now fishing more often than working. The old man admitted that saying no to certain people had given him peace. Together they agreed there was little difference between a hero and a fool, since neither came out ahead. Months later, Tim was still handling everyday calls, troubled homes, frightened people, small acts of violence, and regret. At a department banquet, he accepted a commendation with quiet pride, satisfied he had carried responsibility without failing it.